This is the story of an adventurer who, after dying, is reborn as the weakest kind of monster. But that doesn't stop him. Grinding through a labyrinth, he grows even stronger than he was in life, all while catching the eye of some very beautiful women. A man faces a mighty dragon in a dungeon and dies. He wakes up by a lake, looks at his reflection, and realizes he's a skeleton now, rewinding to the day before. Rent Faina, a bronze-class adventurer, gets up early and heads to the Adventurers Guild to look for a job. There he runs into acquaintances who tease him that he must be going back into the labyrinth again. Rent's been an adventurer for 10 years and sits at the second lowest tier of bronze, so he usually works alone. He makes a living selling monster materials and even manages to save a little. Rent descends into the labyrinth and finds a new passage. Sensing a good haul, he presses on by himself, and that's where he runs into a dragon, the oldest of monsters. Rent asks himself how he survived. He's become one of the beings known as undead, but even a simple monk or priest could destroy him. He realizes he can't go back to town. Labyrinths and dungeons exist all over the land, but no one knows where they came from or how monsters appeared in them. Meanwhile, Rent encounters a skeleton and charges it, only to trip along with his sword, just like the other skeleton. He channels spirit energy and wins. From the remains, he absorbs energy and immediately remembers how his friend once explained that monsters can evolve into higher forms. For instance, skeletons can turn into ghouls. Rent decides he needs to evolve into a ghoul so he can enter town. He pushes deeper, defeating skeletons, and comes across a slime, another low-tier creature like a skeleton. Slimes can be beaten either by dealing massive damage or by destroying the magic core. Rent quickly strikes the core and wins, then collects the slime's fluids into vials to sell later. Back at the guild, the receptionist Sheila is asked about a newcomer no one wants to party with. She had planned to ask Rent to help the girl, but the girl didn't wait. She went into the labyrinth on her own because she urgently needed money. In the dungeon, Rent realizes he doesn't feel hunger or sleepiness. He can still use holy power despite being undead, and that same power can extend the shelf life of food. He reflects on how weak he was despite 20 years as an adventurer, including 10 years of training. Even so, he's gifted with spirit energy, mana, and holy power, rare even among the best. Despite only modest results, Rent never gave up and kept improving, because he dreams of becoming a mithril-class adventurer, a rank awarded to those who've saved an entire country. Even as a skeleton, he refuses to let go of that dream. After a few more victories, he's stronger than he was in life. Absorbing a slime's energy, he evolves into a ghoul. Rent starts practicing how to speak again. He then encounters goblins and dispatches them with little trouble. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the same labyrinth, a girl is fighting a skeleton. Rent watches from hiding but hesitates to approach. He doesn't recognize her, even though he knows almost everyone in Malt. When another skeleton attacks the girl, Rent jumps in and cleaves it in half. He tries to talk to her, but she's terrified. He throws his weapon aside and tries to explain he isn't an enemy, but he's not very convincing. He asks her to buy him clothes and hands over money. The girl introduces herself as Rina Rupaj and gives her knight's word that she'll repay him. She returns to the guild to ask Sheila for help. Rent gains warrior's intuition, and while he's mulling that over, he hears Rina calling for him. She brings him clothes and even the change, but she's still afraid of him. He pulls out a hooded cloak and other items and gets dressed, but his face still stands out too much. Rina then offers him a mask. It clamps onto his face and won't come off. It turns out to be cursed. He can't remove it even with holy power. Realizing Rent is a good person, Rina promises she won't be scared of him anymore. They head back to Malt, chatting about adventurer life on the way. At the gate, Rent realizes he knows many of the guards and they'll recognize him by his pass, so he and Rina try another entrance. The guards there stop him and ask him to show his face, but they can't remove the mask. They conclude they're dealing with a monster. Rent slips away at the gate and promises Rena they'll meet again once he looks more human. He goes to see his old friend Lorraine, who's pretending to nap. He wakes her and shows her he's become a ghoul. Lorraine has studied monsters for a long time, but has never seen someone become one. She asks if he's truly Rent, and he's not sure how to answer. What he can say for certain is that he wants to be an adventurer and reach mithril class. Still, Rent understands that in this form, he can't enter the guild or an inn, so he asks Lorraine to take jobs in his stead. She agrees, on the condition that she can study him. The next day, Lorraine returns with money from selling the slime. Rent goes to the blacksmith to buy a new sword. The shopkeeper says her husband, Clope, is very meticulous, so the forging will take a few days. Meanwhile, Lorraine reads up on ghouls. They possess great strength and can even survive without a head. She ponders this unique case and remembers how she met Rent. They had gone gathering herbs together. Lorraine was bored, even though she was the youngest scholar to hold a master's title, and she left anyway. While they were gathering, she was impressed by how skillfully Rent picked plants. Then, a goblin attacked. Rent shielded Lorraine, and she took the goblin out with a fireball. Rent says that after seeing how flustered she was at the guild, he decided to go with her. He told her he'd studied herbology, monsterology, and combat a lot, and afterward, she asked him to share what he knew. They've been best friends ever since. Rent receives a temporary sword. Even though he never reveals his identity, Clope and his wife clearly realize who he is. At home, he and Lorraine discuss his evolution. Rent says he wants to look more human, so he'll keep grinding in the dungeon. Down there, he rescues a certain man. Rent leaves him with a warning that in the labyrinth, it's every adventurer for themselves, and some pretend to be weak just to rob others, but Rent still tries to help when he can. The man says he's just a cook and came here to pay off a huge debt. Rent takes him on as a porter. He notices a wound on the man's arm and feels a surge of anxiety. They head to an unmarked area to investigate it. Rent tells the man he can report the new passage himself. They step into a chamber, and the man triggers a teleportation circle. Rent refuses to abandon him and teleports after, where he faces a giant skeleton. He coats his body in spirit energy, but he can't pierce its bones. It turns out this is the floor boss they need to defeat to escape, so he infuses his sword with holy power, hacks through the skeleton's leg, and finishes it off. He heals the man's wounds and gives him a spirit stone, asking in return that he act as a go-between and serve food for free at his shop. The man breaks down in tears and thanks him. It turns out Rent can also perceive magic circles. They return to town, where the man's wife, Isabel, greets him. The couple rejoice that they can finally deal with their debt. The man introduces himself as Loris Cariello. Rent gives his name and asks him to keep it secret. Rent thinks about how, if that man had turned out to be a villain, he wouldn't have held back. A thirst for blood rises within him. He approaches Lorraine, hugs her, and bites her to drink her blood. Lorraine casts a spell, and he collapses. She tells him only to pounce on her when he's in his right mind. She doesn't mind giving herself to him. Rent wakes up and apologizes to Lorraine. His memory of what happened is hazy. Worried about her, he heals the wound he made. Studying himself, Rent notices he's changed. The mask can now alter its shape, and he even speaks more clearly. They suspect he's undergone another evolution, to a ghast, also called a vampire thrall. Lorraine proposes that his transformations are unusual, and wonders why he evolved into a ghoul in the first place. She says that evolution is the process by which a monster achieves its desired form. Rent realizes he needs to become a vampire, though they aren't sure simple monster hunting will get him there. But Lorraine promises to help. After that, she gets fired up with ideas for experiments. The next day, Rent hands his badly damaged sword to Clope and asks him to finish the new blade as soon as possible. It's not ready yet, so Clope gives him a different sword in the meantime. Meanwhile, Lorraine gives Rent some poison to test on him. Turns out poisons don't affect him, but healing potions and herbs do work. He doesn't feel like sleeping, but hunger still hits. Lorraine lets him drink a drop of her blood, and that tiny amount is enough to quell the thirst. Rent is about to head to the guild, but Lorraine stops him. She says everyone will remember Rent Faina. He often helped rookies and was in the guild's good graces. They'd even planned to invite him to work there. In the end, they decide Rent should pretend to be someone else. At the guild, Rent approaches Sheila and says he wants to register as an adventurer. He fills out the paperwork and introduces himself as Rent Vivi, taking Lorraine's family name and posing as her relative. They assign him the lowest iron rank. In the dungeon, he hears the sounds of battle and comes upon a swordsman and a healer fighting goblins. He later returns to the room, bosses sight, and steps into a different teleportation circle. Rent finds himself in a strange chamber facing a skeleton, and a mysterious woman starts talking to him. He says he was just looking for valuables, but she calls him a thief and attacks. When she realizes he's aghast, she apologizes and gives him her cloak. She asks him to keep this place secret, and as hush money, hands him the map of Akasha, an artifact that records the path its bearer takes. Then, she teleports him to the entrance. Together with Lorraine, he studies the artifact. When they pour mana into it, a map of the dungeon appears, and it even shows people along with their names. Lorraine realizes it's an extremely powerful relic that should be locked in the royal treasury. The cloak, it turns out, has strong resistance to magic, and is almost impossible to cut with a sword. Rent plans to return to that room and talk to the mysterious woman again. He can't find the entrance to that chamber. Meanwhile, at the guild, everyone's worried about Rent, and Sheila recalls how she first met him, when suddenly he shows up. He takes a quest for orcs, tough monsters that are hard for bronze ranks to handle. He returns with their meat, and the receptionist asks him to wait. He's handed a letter inviting him to a rank-up trial. Lorraine is delighted by how quickly he's moving up, and asks what name he used. Rent says he took her surname, so he wouldn't tarnish Lorraine's reputation. He thanks her for all her help. The next day, Rent arrives for the rank-up exam. There are 2 stages, written and practical. He spots the young adventurers from before. He realizes the girl's teammate can't write, which isn't unusual for commoners, but Rent is well-schooled, so it's no issue for him. He aces the test. For the next stage, Rent is placed on a team with Rise and Laura. Their assignment is to reach a marked point on the map. The first team there gets a reward. Near the labyrinth, Rent suggests they buy a new map since the one from the guild is 15 years out of date. They pick up a map of the first floor. In the dungeon, they breeze through the weaker monsters. Rent gives them lots of pointers. They notice incense that lures monsters. Up ahead, Rent senses an ambush set by people. They run into another party. Rent disables the archer, then rushes the mage. Rise and Laura take down the third attacker. Rent says monsters aren't the only danger in the dungeon, and an adventurer must be ready for anything. He even figures out the guild sent the assailants. Meanwhile, the guildmaster speaks with Sheila. Rumors are swirling about Rent Vivi, and he asks Sheila to report everything. In the dungeon, their team reaches the floormaster's door. They run into other examinees who mock them, and a fight nearly breaks out. Rent lets the mockers go first. Guild staff carry those challengers out soon after, badly injured. Rent tells his team there's no shame in fleeing from a stronger enemy, but Rise is confident and says he's ready. Once they steel themselves, they enter the room. Inside is a gigantic slime. The team feels sure of themselves. Rise charges, only to be blasted back. Rent says the 2 of them can handle the slime, and Laura starts charging mana for a powerful strike. They draw the slime's attention while the mage readies a strong fire attack that kills it. They smash the magic core and begin gathering slime materials for potions. Another group rushes in and triggers a sleeping gas trap. They realize the guild misled them, and they take away a lesson. An adventurer shouldn't rush. Just complete the mission on time. They enter a room where the guild examiner is waiting. He hands them proof of completion and, as the first to finish, rewards them with potions. Before heading out, they descend to the second floor. It's a dense green forest with sunlight streaming through. They return to the guild. They receive bronze badges and their promotions are approved. Rise and Laura thank Rent for his guidance. Sheila asks Rent to follow her. He suspects she's figured him out. She asks him to tell the truth. Rent says he got wrapped up in a complicated mess and didn't want to drag anyone in. Sheila suspected he was Rent, but she didn't tell the guildmaster. She produces a magic contract that would make her his slave if she breaks it. Rent can't understand why, but she says she wants to back him up. He signs, shows her his face, and explains how he became a monster in the labyrinth. Sheila believes in his kindness and says she'll always help him. That evening, Rent and Sheila go to Lorraine's. They talk about Rent. Lorraine tries to scare her, joking that she's a witch and will eat her, a test of Sheila's trust. They sit down to dinner. Sheila says Rent draws a lot of attention because novice adventurers have been disappearing across the kingdom, and some people suspect him. Rent takes a 4-day break from dungeon dives. The next morning at the Adventurers Guild, the guildmaster asks after Rent, but gets no answer. Lorraine worries Rent has gone to the labyrinth, but he shows up at Clope's to pick up his new sword, made specifically for him. He starts testing it. Clope is amazed by Rent's new strength. After a strike with holy power, sprouts shoot from the log he hit. Clope asks how he can use holy power. Rent explains that once, on a whim, he repaired an altar. Next, Rent tries a blow that combines all his spirit energy and mana. He obliterates the log, then combines all 3 energies. The sword turns to ash, and the log becomes a smooth, round sphere. Later, he hears a boy begging a man for help. Rent hands over a silver coin and asks what happened. The boy begs him to defeat their guardian, the Lord of the Lake. His name is Loon, from the eastern village of Tatsa, which holds a strange festival based on a legend where the Lord of the Lake saved the village in exchange for a girl's life. This year, however, it ate one of the maidens and is demanding more. Loon asks Rent to save his sister, Amaris, who's next in line. The village feels empty. At Loon's house, Rent sees a mark on the door, possibly left by a strong monster like a kelpie. The girl says she's ready to be the sacrificial maiden and asks Rent to leave, but he refuses. That evening, they plan how to save her. Loon says he's ready to do anything. The next morning, Rent meets some merchants who warn him off and tell him to go. They're acting suspicious, and Rent starts to suspect them. That evening, Amaris is prepared for the ritual. She hadn't run for the village's sake, fearing the Lord of the Lake might burn it down. Rent appears by the tent and tells her he'll come up with something. The main thing is not to give in and keep fighting. At night, the ritual begins. Rent and Amaris push off from shore. They're swallowed by fog, and a monster appears. Thanks to potions, the adventurer can walk on water, and he engages it. Rent realizes it's a kraken, and it doesn't breathe fire. He cuts through it and spots a ship. Aboard are the merchants he saw earlier. They attack him, but Rent defeats them. By morning, the villagers are interrogating the merchants. It turns out they were kidnapping girls to sell into slavery, but the girls are alive, hidden near the lake. Rent leaves the village, and Amaris sends him off with a kiss. The next day, Rent picks out a quest. Sheila offers him one job, but his attention is caught by a request to collect a dragon's blood flower for 1 copper. Sheila warns it's a tough assignment because it only grows in poisonous swamps. The request came from the children at the orphanage to make a medicine. Later, Rent arrives at the orphanage. The kids swarm him with questions, and he notes how kind they are and how lovingly they're raised. A little girl named Eliza leads him to the headmistress, who thanks him for agreeing to clean out the basement. Eliza explains the director is sick with a corruption blight that can only be cured with a potion. Rent agrees to help. Before that, he goes down to the basement and finds white rats. One bites him and changes color. He tells it to spin, and it does. He brings the rat to Lorraine. It turns out anyone who drinks Rent's blood can become his servant. Lorraine names the rat Edel. That night they discuss how dangerous the Tarrasque Marsh is. Lorraine says Tarrasques live there, powerful monsters that, according to rumor, fear holy water. The next day, Rent reaches the marsh and immediately runs into goblins. He beats them with ease. Farther along, he meets another monster and quickly wins again. Meanwhile, Sheila and Lorraine talk about Rent and his dream of becoming a mithril-class adventurer. They know a lot about him, but not the reason he wants that rank. Back at the marsh, Rent encounters a Tarrasque. He can't pierce its scales, and then the rat attacks the monster on its own. Rent infuses his sword with holy power and takes its head off in a single swing. He stashes the Tarrasque's carcass in a magic bag and comes upon a field of dragon's blood flowers. There he meets a strange elf who's also after the bloom. The elf says his lady sent him to admire the flower and adds he wants to hire Rent to bring him red blossoms. He introduces himself as Isaac Hart. That evening, Rent returns to the guild and heads to the butcher with Sheila to unload the Tarrasque. The butcher praises the carcass's pristine condition and gets to work. Sheila notes Rent has gotten much stronger and is worthy of silver rank. Rent doesn't quite accept that power as his own, but he's happy to be getting stronger. The next morning, he goes back to the orphanage and hands the flowers over to the healer. He gives a generous amount to help those in need. Eliza thanks Rent and says she wants to become an adventurer, promising she'll always help him. Rent says he'll help train her, gives her some money, and suggests she take lessons from Lorraine. That evening, Rent misses Lorraine's hints, which annoys her, but he manages to compliment her so well that he leaves his friend flustered. In the morning, Rent drops by the guild, where Sheila urgently calls him over and asks if he knows anyone from House Latour, an ancient family that wields influence over the entire city. They've issued him a commission. Rent approaches the Latour estate. A guard warns him that the garden is a labyrinth created with an artifact. The family has been collecting such items for ages. The gates open only rarely, and whoever clears the labyrinth will receive an artifact from the master as a gift. The guard's advice: don't rely on the sun. Anticipating a good artifact, Rent wanders the maze for quite a while. He emerges somewhere near the center of the garden, where a young woman is sitting. She invites him to rest with a cup of tea. Rent realizes the teapot is also an artifact that can brew any tea. She says she bought it for 300 platinum coins, when even one would be enough to live on for life. The woman notices his mask is an artifact too and asks to buy it. He glances up at the sun and sees it vanish, realizing the labyrinth shifts at intervals. She introduces herself as Laura Latour, head of House Latour. As a reward for getting through the labyrinth, she lets him choose an artifact. Rent asks if he can take the one that created the garden, but Laura can't give him that. They step into a room filled with artifacts. She tosses him a ball that never stops bouncing. Then Rent spots a miniature mana-driven airship and immediately wants it, but he forces himself to resist. When he focuses on the craft, his consciousness jumps into it and he can see through its eyes. He lifts a painting and a monster leaps out. Startled, Rent slaps a hand onto a golem and activates it. He starts distracting the golem while Isaac looks for a shutoff. Rent deftly chops off its arm and recalls Lorraine's note that golems have a deactivation mark carved on their foreheads, but this one doesn't. Rent begins charging a strike with mana and spirit energy when Laura switches it off. She apologizes for the incident, and they continue examining the artifacts. They arrive at stands displaying monster spoils, where Rent notices a vial that awakens his hunger. Vampire blood. Rumor has it anyone who drinks it goes mad. Rent makes his choice and takes the FPV drone. He's also given the vial of vampire blood. That night at the manor, Laura and Isaac discuss their guest, and she admits Rent has caught her interest. Later, Lorraine warns him about the risks of vampire blood and advises him not to drink it. She says she'll accept him even if he remains undead, but she understands that won't stop him. His dream of mithril is unshakable. Lorraine grows thoughtful, and Rent asks what's wrong. She says she wants to know why he wants to become a mithril adventurer. Rent says it's about revenge and tells his story. He was born in a small village, and his merchant parents once took him to the city. There, his friend Jin Lin told him she wanted to be an adventurer. As a child, Rent was timid and kept to himself. On the way home, monsters attacked their wagon and killed all the adults, but the children managed to flee. A monstrous wolf came after them. At the last moment, Jin Lin saved Rent and just before the finishing blow, a man in armor appeared and engaged the beast. His sheer power drove it off. The adventurer rescued Rent and led him back to the village. Before leaving, he gave the boy advice Rent still follows to this day. The man introduced himself as Wilfred Lucard, a mithril-class adventurer, and told Rent to seek him out. Rent says he won't give up and decides to accept the vampire blood. He drinks it. At first, nothing. Then he writhes in agony. He feels his body changing and his mind slipping, but he hears Lorraine's voice cheering him on and pulls himself together. Meanwhile in town, Clope forges a new orichalcum sword for Rent. At the orphanage, the headmistress is on the mend. At the guild, Rise, Laura, and Rena pick out a quest, recalling Rent's advice. Rent comes too. He sees Lorraine reading a book about vampires and congratulating him on his evolution. Rent undresses, and wings sprout from his back. His fangs lengthen, and his eyes turn red. Lorraine is overjoyed to see his face again. Later, out in a field, they talk about Wilfried. Rent says the time has come. He's ready to find him. And that's how the first chapter of The Unwanted Undead Adventurer comes to an end. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the channel and hit like if you're waiting for the continuation. See you next time.